Our next guest is a figure of business, technology, an enthusiast, an investor, and a promoter of entrepreneurship. He is a firm supporter of clean energy, the humane treatment of animals, and a vocal supporter of the private sector in the Middle East. His Royal Highness Prince Khalid bin Alwaleed bin Talal Al Saud, founder and Chief Executive Officer of KBW Ventures.
رحبوا معي بالمؤسس والرئيس التنفيذي لشركة KBW Ventures صاحب السمو الملكي الأمير خالد بن الوليد بن طلال آل سعود. ينضم مع سموه على المنصة مدير هذه الجلسة AB سام توماس رئيس تحرير Entrepreneur الشرق الأوسط.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming His Royal Highness on stage along with our moderator for this session, Abi Sam Thomas, Editor-in-Chief of Entrepreneur Middle East.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you to Sheikh Abudur, Najla Al-Midfa, Sheikh Shamma, His Royal Highness right here, and all of you here for coming together for this edition of Sharjah Entrepreneurship Festival. I've been coming to this festival since its first edition, and it's purely a joy to see how it's growing year by year and having all this amount of support come together here in Sharjah. Your Royal Highness, first of all, welcome to the Sharjah Entrepreneurship Festival. I know you've been here to Sharjah a couple of times, but your first impressions of the Sharjah Entrepreneurship Festival.
Hello, everyone. It's a really impressive event, and I've been following it for a few years now, and I'm really honored to be here. And there's no better place for entrepreneurship to start than to this venue. I'm really excited about our talk and to see what other companies can come out of here.
Great. Let's start with a little bit about history, about yourself, and how you got interested in this whole world of entrepreneurship and venture capital. What was it that attracted you to this space? How did you get interested in it in the very beginning?
It really all started when I was a child. I loved technology. I've always was fascinated with computers. I was building computers. I've learned to program. After I graduated from college, I thought about why can't I be part of that ecosystem. So I started investing on a small scale in early stage companies. And then I wanted to start my own thing and everything. The usual thing of what college graduates do. And then it just dawned to me that this is really a perfect venue for me to put all my passion in. So I started KBW Investments, actually. A few years after graduating college, and that morphed into a really unorganized venture-backed organization that was primarily me. So I decided to focus it a lot more. So I created KBW Ventures and hired and have some really good partners with me. So we have a chief investment officer, we have a CFO, we have a chief counsel, we have a few directors of investments, and we're a really great team that really looks into what venture has to offer worldwide. How can we be impactful? But more importantly, are these companies giving out a good return or not? At the end of the day, we are a venture company. We're not a charity.
Yes.
So we definitely invest in impact investing, but we also invest in companies that have an impact also.
Right.
But a bottom line return is important, obviously.
Talking about KBW Ventures, if there is a particular rationale with which you go about investing in companies, what is that for you in terms of the companies that you look for, or the companies that even impress you? Like, it doesn't even have to be the startups. Sometimes it's more about the entrepreneurs than the startups. Yeah.
So we rarely invest in seed stage. Obviously, there's a few exceptions, but we rarely invest in seed stage simply because we really. I've learned the hard way. If anyone here has invested in early stage companies, the 80-20 rule, 80% of your money is literally wiped off. 20% drives some of the return. Maybe one or two companies bring back the funds return. So I learned that the hard way. So I decided to move away from that. And we, about 5 years ago, I met with 3 of my partners in a fund called Proof, which is a pro rata opportunity fund. I'll spare you the lingo of what this means and everything, but it's a safer way to invest in venture. I partnered with them not too long ago, again, as I said, about 5 years ago or so, and we've been doing fantastic. We just closed our first fund. We're launching our second fund right now. And it really primarily focuses on companies anywhere between Series A and Series D. Companies have got to have year-over-year 100% growth. They have to have multiple term sheets. They have to have a product, so product market fit has to be a part of it. And obviously, there are a few categories that really define what we do and separate us from all the other funds that are out there.
We heard from Najla Midfa as she was speaking on stage, where we are talking about it's not about like profit or impact. It is more about them having it together. And I mean, having followed you for quite a while now, I know that you are personally, keen on the environment. You are against cruelty to animals. You are a keen environmentalist as well. How does these, personal passions, if I do call them that, translate into the kind of startups that you invest in? Because the number of startups that you've done, be it in the food tech space, be it with regards to the environment, how does that translate with, like you said, it's not a charity, you're still looking for a return on investment?
Well, again, it all depends on the companies that we invest in. So I will not invest in, for example, companies that has earth exploitation, animal exploitation. I won't invest in drug discovery. I won't invest in companies that have to do with alcohol, tobacco, gambling, and all that stuff. So it really narrows down the path to a lot of feel-good companies and companies with good returns and actual products that they can deliver on. And it really depends on the entrepreneur and whom I'm talking to. The entrepreneur, we talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, we interview a lot of entrepreneurs. So drive is more important, dedication is really important, but really knowing how you're going to stand out apart from the other companies is super, super important. I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say, we're the next Uber. As soon as someone says that, I close the door, I'm like, I'm not interested. Everybody wants to be the next Uber. That's not the point that's not the focus that I want to invest in. I want to invest in a company that really knows how to stand out from the herd, so to speak. And really knows their numbers and is dedicated to actually deliver on his promise. More importantly, there has to be a good initiative that comes out of one of these companies. It just can't be just a bottom line. Most likely, we would invest in companies that just have a bottom line that doesn't have a negative impact, but it's always a double positive if you have a double bottom line.
Speaking of the companies, I will come back to the entrepreneurs because we are talking to a room full of entrepreneurs, so we'll definitely come back to that. But speaking of the startups or the companies that you've supported in the recent past, you've done a bunch of plant-based investments like Beyond Meat. We also had cellular agriculture with Memsid Meats. These companies, what is your interest in them, both from a personal and an investment perspective, considering the long-term effects of what it's doing to our environment, and again, your personal missions as well?
So continuing the status quo of how we're feeding the world cannot be sustained with feeding 7 billion, 8 billion, and soon to be 9 billion people. We don't have the resources, we don't have the capacity, and frankly, the Earth can't take it any longer. And if the Earth can't take it, we will not be able to take it. And it's a relationship all of one. So investing in companies that truly have revolutionized the way that protein is sourced is something that I was super interested in about 5 years ago. And I remember meeting Ethan Brown, I think about 5 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, at he's the CEO of Beyond Meat. I've met him about 5 years ago in his small office in Los Angeles. And he showed me his product, and it wasn't out yet. And I didn't get to taste it, sadly. But I talked to him, and I said, this guy's onto something. There's a credibility over here that I really want to be a part of. So again, sourcing protein or mimicking the protein that you get from animals through plants is literally one of the best ways to achieve a more sustainable lifestyle. The water degradation that we're causing from the way that we're factory farming, the land devastation that we're doing. You've seen all the fires, and all those fires aren't happening all of a sudden. There's a reason behind them, and the reason is you have to have livestock, cattle, so to speak, to feed. So you can't have trees, you just have to have a flat land for these animals to go. And this is a real serious issue that we're facing. And forget what's happening in one part of the world or another. We're all interconnected. This is all one ecosystem, and if it's affecting Brazil, if it's affecting other places around the world, it will affect us eventually. So if the product tastes as good, if not better, if it costs the same, if not less, if it's easy to manufacture, then people are going to go and flock to it, just like they're doing with other plant-based proteins. And that's where plant-based proteins come into play. Cellular agriculture, on the other hand, to me, is the answer for meat, generating meat in general. We've invested alongside Bill Gates and Richard Branson, DFJ and others in Memphis Meats. And what they do is something called cellular agriculture. Basically, to put it in easier terms, you're actually growing a cell, an animal muscle, so to speak. So you take a cell from an animal, and then you grow it into an actual piece of meat. And that's a process that takes 3 to 6 weeks. It takes about 99% water, about 95% less land. There's zero suffering involved, and it tastes the same, if not better. There's no antibiotics, there's no hormones involved. You can just have a giant bioreactor and just keep churning out pieces of flesh, which is what meat is. And it's much more sustainable. We're working with a bunch of companies right now. I can't really divulge which company it is, but we're really interested in fish, for example. A lot of people are focused on chicken, duck, beef, but I'm really on the boat I'm on the boat with them, but I really am interested in the seafood aspect of this. So we're interested in that, and we're also invested in a company we're going to be announcing in the next 2 weeks or so.
Speaking about these companies that you've invested in, and most of these companies, I mean, the culture that we're talking about is very much prevalent in the West. When it comes to the Middle East, do you think there is a growing appetite towards these kind of, plant-based meats, plant-based investments from a general perspective? And I know that from your personal stories that you've already convinced your father to adopt this particular diet. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that as well?
My father read Dr. Michael Greger's book, How Not to Die, and it took about 4 months of analyzing for him to make that change. I didn't do much of the convincing, sadly, but it's all good. Michael Greger is a dear friend, and I'm so happy that he was part of that change. What was the question again?
In the Middle East, how's the attitude?
So in the Middle East, I mean, look, the numbers speak for themselves. So we are investors in Beyond Meat, and we're seeing a large amount of interest coming out of the Middle East for their plant-based burgers. We're seeing we're seeing about 3 or 4 or 5 different outlets carry the Beyond Burger. Bear Burger has them. I'm not plugging them. There's no sponsorship whatsoever. I'd like a free burger once in a while, but no. There are a bunch of companies that are offering it. I believe a few retail chains are offering it, but they're not there all the time. So the need is there, the want is there, the desire is there, and that's what I've been voicing to Beyond. And luckily, there's going to be a good presence here in the Middle East very soon.
Can you also talk about your collaboration with Chef Matthew Kenny? I think it was in Bahrain and now in Dubai as well. Yeah.
So Matthew Kenny, it's away from the burgers. It's more of a plant-based food, so to speak. It's not a vegan, so to speak. So it's a lot cleaner. It's a lot fresher. There's no burgers involved in anything. And that was a collaboration that I did with Matthew Kenny. And we established a company called Folia. And our first deal was the Four Seasons in Los Angeles. Pretty easy sell, simply because, you know, California, everyone wants to be green and all that good stuff over there, which is great. But creating that first wave, tidal wave, so to speak, in Los Angeles really created a lot of desire for other Four Seasons hotels to get that menu. So we're doing that in Bahrain right now. We have it already launched in 2 of the Four Seasons here. So one in Jumeirah, one in the IFC. We're working on that in Riyadh and working on it in other Gulf states.
And what's the reception you've seen? Like, just like on first-hand notice, like what has been the comments you've received for Folia here?
What was the
response you received?
Oh, the response has been amazing, thank you. And thank God the response has been amazing. Why? It's because hotels generally, as a vegan, I can say this myself. I'm not sure about anyone here, but as soon as you look into the health food section in a hotel, it's pretty bleak. It's pretty. Ugh, sorry. You know, there's the two celery sticks and a grape, and here you go. That's your food. I'm like, no. You know, plant-based food is a lot more complex than that, a lot more desirable than that. So we created a really complex and flavorful and presentable food that really people loved. And we're seeing a big jump in sales in Bahrain. As soon as we launch it officially here in Dubai, we're going to see hopefully, we're going to see a lot of people go to that and have a really delicious plant-based alternative than the health food section that other hotels have.
Very good. You know, we're talking about the Middle East, and you know, at this point, I have to. I know you were at the Miss Global Forum just last week. You've been at a bunch of events across the region, like in Bahrain and so on and so forth. From your perspective, say over the last 4 or 5 years, what's your perception of the Middle East entrepreneurial ecosystem at this point?
So the Middle East entrepreneurial system is very strong and is very real. Sure, we've had a few exits that are giving out some false signals on how successful and how big the entrepreneurial ecosystem here is. It's not mature, it's not there yet, but it's definitely coming together nicely. Mm-hmm. A Souk.com exit was definitely a good thing, but it gave a lot of false hope to a lot of people. And a lot of false advertising happening in the ecosystem, saying that they're the next Souk and they're the next Kareem. Mm-hmm. We still have a long way to go. I believe in Saudi Arabia alone, there's been an uptick of about 50 million riyals of deals happening in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. Granted, that's a day in Silicon Valley. So we have a long way to go. And by the way, our ecosystem or our economy here can sustain larger deals. The issue here is not lack of drive. The issue here isn't lack of desire. It's an issue with legislation, and also with some of the bankruptcy laws that we have in the Middle East in general. And they're being mitigated as we speak, especially in Saudi at least. We've seen some programs coming out of the Saudi government that are really encouraging. So Munshaat is definitely something that I'm really following very closely. SVC, Dr. Nabil Koshek is doing an amazing job over there with doing a program with through investing with venture-backed companies, doing a one-to-one, so to speak, deal flow. So if someone puts $1, they would match in with $1. And that's really created a really good startup phase. But the issue in the Middle East isn't the startup phase. So us Arabs know very well that there's no shortage of finding moms, pops, grandfathers, uncles, and aunts who are going to fund my company and everything. That's not going to be an issue here in the Middle East, at least. The issue is follow-on investing. The issue is Series B, C, D, and onwards. There's a big gap that needs to be fulfilled to fuel the growth for the growth stage that's missing here in the Middle East. And that's what needs to be fulfilled here. And the only way you can fulfill that is to fulfill the early stage, the seed stage ecosystem. And that's happening right now as we speak. So it'll take time. We just don't need to rush this. Just take our time, and the market will mature on itself.
What about the entrepreneurs here in this region?
Yeah.
I mean, what you're saying is, I mean, it's great. It's great to hear that from someone who's actually working within the ecosystem that, yes, this is the state of affairs as of now. But for entrepreneurs who are still struggling, who are still finding it difficult to, like, you know, get their enterprises off the ground, what is your, I would say, advice, or what would your theme be for them so that, you know, they get that head start with their enterprises?
Don't focus on the Middle East. It's
Okay.
simple, because I've had a lot of investors talk to me about their product and how big it is going to be in the Middle East. Don't focus on just the Middle East. You have the entire world at your fingertips right now. Why are you just focusing on one sector? So really show how interesting your company can be everywhere else in the world other than the Middle East. Sure, you can start here. You have to start somewhere. So start here, but also have a plan for expansion internationally. And then you're going to get that supercharged approach for growth stage or mid, or just where the medium stages, where the D all the way down to E and F, those stages are missing, and you can always tap into them internationally. All the biggest venture companies or venture funds internationally do invest in companies outside of Silicon Valley. The thing is, there's no reach from here all the way to Silicon Valley. You always think that I need to talk to WAMDA, I need to talk to all the local guys here. You don't need to just do that. You can talk to them over here, but also talk to other companies internationally. So you can, one, get the exposure, two, educate yourself on how to pitch. And the difference between pitching between early stage and later stage and middle stage, there's a whole different ballgame there. And that's all that's missing here. And just expand internationally, and then it won't be easy, granted, but keep getting no's. The more no's you get, the closer you are to get the yes.
Talking about pitching, I'm going to like drill down on that particular topic, because that's always a problem situation, or rather a touchy topic to talk about. And you have heard from pitches from, like, I'm going to say zillions of entrepreneurs over the course of the years. What are the top mistakes, I would say? Rather than telling them how to do their pitches, let's tell them what not to do when pitching to an investor.
Don't tell me how big a market is. And how 1% of the market is going to make a huge difference. I don't care about that. I care about how you're going to achieve getting that 1%. Know your numbers. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to have valued their company way more than what they should be valuing at. So know your numbers and justify your numbers and why they're either inflated or not inflated to the extent they are. I want to say that I need to see drive. I mean, investors, myself included, but investors will always, I can't say BS here, can I? So again, they can smell a BSer, so to speak. Sorry, Sheikh. But you can tell if someone's trying to sell you some snake oil, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So you have to be honest, and you have to show how you're going to achieve these numbers. Having a great idea, everybody and their mom has a great idea. That's not the point here. The point is, how are you going to achieve that, and is there a market for it here? And just be honest and accept a no, because at the end of the day, accept a no, but there always has to be a justification to a no. I will never tell an entrepreneur no, and just close the door. I always tell them why there's a no, what you need to do to amend or fix that business model to at least be attractive for me. That might not be his vision, but I don't need to invest in his vision. I need to invest in the company, so to speak.
What about the, I mean, this is a viewpoint from the entrepreneurs side of things. Like, there is a notion, at least, they should be wary of the VCs they talk to. They should be apprehensive in a way. Is there any weight you would give to that statement at all? And if so, what would your response be?
So VCs and entrepreneurs are one of the same. One cannot exist without the other. At the end of the day, an investor will tie up his money with a venture company for at least 7 to 10 to 15 years. Frankly, that's longer than many marriages. So, I mean, it is. So you're going to have to be with that person for a long time. So besides getting along, you have to have the ability to communicate with each other. You have to have the ability to open up and tell the investor or tell the entrepreneur, and vice versa, why you're proceeding the way you're proceeding. There has to be an open dialogue, or else it's just not going to work out. So again, they're one of the other. They're one of the other. So you have to have you have to be synchronized in order and in your vision to invest in these companies, or else it's just it's not an interesting topic for me. I wouldn't invest in someone who doesn't strike me as interesting, who doesn't strike me as this company. I want to be a part of this because this will change the world.
Right. In terms of like the landscape as of now, are there any particular sectors, are there particular industries that you think are like ripe for entrepreneurial opportunity but haven't been struck yet? Maybe this is something like KPW Ventures is already looking at, but are there any particular sectors like you would advise the wannabes and entrepreneurs already in the room to look at?
Solve a problem. So solve a problem that you think exists in your region or you believe exists in the world. There are many problems in the world, clearly, and just pick one of them and see how you can solve it your way. It's not really a difficult task to figure out what problems you want to solve. It's just how are you going to solve it. For me, environmental is so important. I mean, at the end of the day, there has never been a more important and more pressing time to focus on the environment, focus on what we're doing what are we doing in destroying the environment the way we are now. I can't think of a better time for someone to focus on these things. Granted, if you're focusing on that, you're talking about carbon capturing, for example. This is one of the biggest topics that are out there right now. That's really interesting for me. That's something that I would love to talk about. I'd love to interview a few entrepreneurs, a few companies. I'd love to be part of. That's going to be a huge issue. But again, solve a problem that's existing either in your region or in the world, and explain how that problem can be solved. Again, it doesn't have to be environmental. It can be anywhere from, I don't know, sleeping better at night, from a Casper bed that, for example, we invested in, all the way up to a company that we're part of indirectly, a carbon capture company that we're part of indirectly, or even cellular agriculture. I mean, governments have the ability and have the right to go to these early stage companies and open up the doors and ease regulation for them so they can come here and open up R&D facilities, employ people, get people's interest flowing into these types of companies. We're seeing retail happening here. We're seeing logistics. We're seeing last mile. So we're seeing these things. These are nice problems, and they're, again, maybe first world problems, but we really need to step it up and focus on what does the world need also.
The bigger problems, so to speak. I would like to open up for questions, so I would say, just keep in mind your questions. We'll have a mic going around in a short while. At this point, I also have to ask, the Middle East as a region, it's not just the UAE, it's Saudi Arabia, it's Bahrain, whichever country you want to speak of, is really making a push in terms of supporting innovation, supporting entrepreneurship. Yeah. And you alluded to this earlier in our conversation. What, according to you, are still some of the gaps that remain when it comes to like entities that are supporting entrepreneurs? What are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? And is there something you would say they need to start doing it now so that we have this as a more sustainable, longer-term ecosystem?
The Middle East, and in terms of the UAE, but I'm going to talk about Saudi Arabia specifically, has had a tremendous change for the last 3 or 4 years right now, and it's really opened up to foreign investments. It's really opened up to easing the environment for entrepreneurs to open up their companies, and then establish their companies, run their companies, and maybe, God forbid, close their companies down and start a new company. And I think we're on the right track. I mean, the transformation that Saudi is going through right now, with the leadership of His Majesty King Salman, and obviously the leadership of Emir Mohammed bin Salman, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, has never happened in the history of Saudi as it is happening right now. So it is a perfect time to really start your business and make and lead in the change that you want to be in this world, starting in Saudi.
Fair enough. Final question from me, at least. When it comes to becoming an entrepreneur, what would you say should be the central ideal or central theme that should be pushing them forward? Because at this point, again, because entrepreneurship has been glamorized to a certain extent, it's now cool to be an entrepreneur. There might be a loss of direction, I would say, in terms of why you're doing what you want to do. What's your take on this particular?
I mean, again, the first thing that I thought about after graduating college was starting my own thing and doing your own thing. And that's all fun and it's all great. And at the end of the day, solve a problem. You know, everybody wants to start their own company. Solve a problem, solve a real problem that exists in the world. Start something that you're passionate about. Don't start something that you think an investor wants to hear. And then at the end of the day, we're not going to invest in a company or in a person that doesn't have passion to what he wants to start. Solve a problem. You know, I can't really tell you more than that. You know, just really solve a problem. Do your homework. Know how to succeed. How to edge out the thousands of others that are trying to beat you, and tell me how are you going to beat them. Don't think that your idea has never been thought of before. Chances are it has. So just do it better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As long as you do it better and solve a problem, basically.
As long as you do it. I mean, it sounds like a super easy concept to do. It's obviously a lot harder than it sounds. Yeah. But again, most importantly, do not be discouraged with a no. You know, take that no, understand why it's a no, and then reinvent what you want to do again and rethink it and just keep evolving.
Fair enough. At this point, I really want to open up for question, and I see hands up already. Can we have a mic for the audience, please?
I've also lived in Saudi for 11 years. And what's your message to women and how they can contribute to the planet in this region? I think both are rising in a big way.
Oh, 100%.
So that's my question to you.
Great question. So,
thank you.
My question to women is rise up and start doing what you're doing, because you're about 50% or 50 times actually more likely to succeed than men in your ventures, by the way. That was a statistic that was done recently. And don't be shy in chasing your dream, and more importantly, don't be discouraged about getting a no. Again, entrepreneurs are always going to hear a no. So keep pushing what you're doing, and at the end of the day, in Saudi at least, you represent about 50% of the population. That's 50% of the population that can contribute to the GDP of Saudi Arabia. That's why Saudi Arabia woke up recently on empowering women a lot more than what they're doing right now. So, for example, Princess Rima bint Bandar, our ambassador in Washington, has initiated the gym licensing, for example. So now women can own a license to operate a gym. And I've taken over her role in the organization. It's called Saudi. I actually forgot what's it called. SFA. That's all I know. Yes. Sports for All Federation. So the Sports for All Federation right now, we're backing women much more than what was expected from us, to be honest.
High time. So much for coming here, and all the best.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think there was a question in the front there, to its left. Yeah.
Yes, hello, Dr. Maher Bahloul from the American University of Sharjah. I was thrilled to hear something along the lines of made in the UAE.
Yep.
I would like to say made in the MENA region also. We would like things really to grow bigger from just the UAE and Saudi Arabia and expand to all the MENA region.
Yep.
My question is very specific to the point of promoting intercultural educational entrepreneurship. Any views on that? And has there been any companies that you promoted along those lines? Thank you.
For education?
Educational and intercultural.
Intercultural. No, I have not invested in companies focused on that, but I am personally for obviously pushing for education, especially in entrepreneurship. But more importantly, I'm more for practice. So I love the fact that people are going to learn about entrepreneurship, but at the end of the day, they have to go to the real world. They have to get They have to get beat down a few times for them to understand what the ecosystem has to offer. So I'm for education for sure. People really need that as a good fallback on in case their businesses don't succeed. But practice is the number one goal for me. If you don't practice, it's not going to happen.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll have time for one more question. Sorry. Sorry, I'm just waiting for the mic to get to her.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, assalamu alaikum. Noura Maiman من المملكة العربية السعودية. I just want to say that I'm a fan of yours and your father. You both have inspired me to appreciate what it is to really, go for your dreams regardless of society. And I know you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
My question for you is about balance. So I'm 36 years old and I started companies and I closed them and I went back and forth. I'm just wondering how you personally work on your own balance kind of regime, and if there's anything that you ever just canceled and said, I'm not going to do right now, or it's not the time for it. And thank you for coming to Sharjah.
Thank you. That's a really good question. So I do have a balance in my life. I mean, there's always you have to strike a balance between professional and your personal life. My balance is 80-20. 80% of the time I work, 20% of the time I'm at home. And that's just my reality. Others have got the different one, obviously, but for me, you're never going to be able to achieve a 50-50 balance if you want to achieve what you want to achieve. That's just not realistic. You have to have your own balance, and your own balance might be good for you, might not be good for someone else. But again, you have to have the drive, and you have to have the commitment, and you have to have the courage to stand up, go against the current, if that's what it needs to do to succeed, and start your business. At the end of the day, don't be focused on and sadly, this might not be the best advice in the world, but I'm just going to say it anyway. You don't have to listen to what family are pushing you towards and listen to them and do what they want to do. You have to do what's true to you. And if what's true to you is starting your own business or changing the world in your specific way, then go ahead and do it, because you're going to hate yourself later in life if you didn't follow your own dreams. At the end of the day, when you succeed, you'll go back and say, I did it my way, and it was good. And if you fail, you'll get up again, and you'll try again, and you'll succeed, and you'll do it your way again. At the end of the day, there's no bad thing about failing. The worst thing you can do is not try. Yeah.
Thank you. At this point, we have to wind up because we have a lot of other speakers coming up on stage. Yep. Prince Khalid, thank you so much for being here, and absolute pleasure having you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.